In a quiet hospital room, Claire's final moments unveiled a secret that shattered her family's assumptions. The man holding her hand, a stranger to them, was her husband, hidden for years to shield him from their prejudice. A letter she left behind revealed a love stronger than their disapproval, forcing them to confront their own biases. Welcome to our channel. We'd be grateful if you'd like and subscribe. This story is about love, sacrifice, and the truth that speaks loudest in silence. The hospital room was hushed, machines humming softly as sunlight slipped through half-drawn blinds, dancing gently on the linoleum floor. Flowers adorned the windowsill, bouquets from colleagues, neighbors, family, friends, filling the space with fragrance, as if trying to mask death's presence. At Claire's bedside sat a man with kind eyes and weary shoulders. Michael's fingers tenderly clasped hers, his thumb tracing slow circles on the back of her hand. He looked like he hadn't slept in days, but his face held no trace of complaint, only devotion, quiet and steadfast. His gaze didn't wander to the others in the room. He didn't flinch when Claire's brother coughed awkwardly by the door, or when her mother dabbed her eyes with a tissue, refusing to look his way. He simply stayed, whispering soft words to the woman he loved. She didn't respond, not anymore, but that didn't stop him. "You were brave," he murmured, even when they didn't understand, especially then. Across the room, Claire's family sat in chairs brought by nurses. Her mother, Margaret, wore pearls and a tight bun unchanged since the 80s, her posture rigid, face pale but unyielding. The only emotion she showed was a fleeting glance at the man beside her daughter, her lips pursing before she turned away. Her father stood by the window, arms crossed, staring at cars in the parking lot as if one might distract him from this moment. A nurse entered, checked the IV, and nodded politely to Michael. "Mr. Harris, let us know if you need anything." Margaret's eyes narrowed. "Harris," she repeated under her breath. Michael caught it but didn't react. His wedding band glinted softly as he brushed a strand of hair from Claire's forehead. He hadn't taken it off since they exchanged vows in a quiet courthouse 7 years ago. She wore hers too, though most never noticed. Today, the light caught it just right. Margaret frowned, her brows knitting, her grip tightening on her purse. No one spoke. They never asked who Claire spent holidays with when she declined their invitations. They never asked who she'd traveled with or why her eyes sparkled when she returned. And Claire never offered. She knew better. Michael had been invisible for years. But now, in her final hours, he was where she always wanted him, by her side, in plain sight, not hidden. Even if they still didn't see him, even if they never would. He leaned closer, pressing his forehead gently to hers. "You didn't need their permission," he whispered, "and you never asked for it." The cardiac monitor beeped steadily, but something in the room shifted. Tension thickened. A cousin cleared her throat. Someone checked their watch. Michael didn't care, because no matter how many people filled that room, none knew how Claire smiled in the mornings. None helped her through the worst of her illness. None heard her laughter in the dark when the power went out, and they lit candles just to feel closer. None knew her, not like he did. So he stayed, silent, present, undeniable, even as her family chose to look away. Michael sat quietly by Claire's bedside, the machines hum a somber soundtrack to memories he didn't ask for, but came flooding anyway. His gaze lingered on a worn leather bag tucked under her bed, a corner of a photo frame peeking out. Through the glass, A frozen moment was visible. Claire, sun-kissed and laughing, resting her head on his shoulder, waves crashing behind them. Their anniversary trip to Myrtle Beach, the one place she didn't have to hide. But from the start, they'd had to hide. He recalled the day they said, "I do." No grand hall, no family, just them, hand in hand in a quiet county courthouse. Claire wore a pale blue dress, her smile nervous but radiant. Michael donned his best suit, tailored for a job interview years before. Their only witnesses were two close friends who knew how rare and real their love was. No photos posted online, no announcement sent. Claire said she didn't want the noise, but Michael knew better. He remembered her slipping her ring into her purse each time she visited her parents, her excuses for being busy during holidays, her saying, "Maybe next year, when things are better." He accepted it, not out of weakness, but love. One Christmas Eve, when she left for her family's dinner, Michael stayed behind, cooking her favorite soup for her return. She came back hours later, makeup smudged, eyes red, saying it still wasn't time. He kissed her forehead and held her anyway. In the quiet of their apartment, he once asked softly, "Don't you ever wish we were easier for them?" Claire looked at him, eyes brimming, and whispered, "They wouldn't understand. I'm protecting you." He smiled and nodded, but something broke inside. Back in the hospital room, whispers cut through like static. Claire's aunt leaned toward her cousin, murmuring, "Poor thing, probably just a close friend." Michael heard it. He always did, but he didn't speak, didn't correct them. He'd learned his love didn't need their approval. His grief didn't need their permission. Still, it hurt. He leaned down, gently pulling the frame from her bag, thumb brushing the glass. Her smile was so wide, so free. The version of her this room never saw, the one that lived in secret. He recalled her whispering against his chest after a long day, "I hate that I can't share you with them, but one day I will." He believed her because, even if she was afraid, her love never wavered. In her quiet gestures, the 2 kisses before work, the stories she saved for him. And here he was, holding her hand as he'd promised, as her husband, in a room full of people who knew only half her life. But he knew it all, and that was enough. The sterile silence of the hospital room was broken only by the rhythmic beep of monitors. Claire's breathing grew shallow, her hand limp in Michael's, their fingers still entwined as they'd been the first time they fell asleep together on their couch years ago, mid-binge of a show they never finished. Michael hadn't moved all morning. He hadn't eaten, hadn't slept, holding on physically and emotionally to the one person who made silence feel like peace, not loneliness. The door creaked open. Margaret swept in, pearls fastened like armor, heels clicking authoritatively on the tile. Her face was pale, her gaze sharp and unrelenting. Behind her trailed a young priest, clutching a Bible, murmuring about blessings. Margaret didn't acknowledge Michael. She stepped to the bed and turned to the priest. She'd want a final prayer. "Please," she said briskly, then shot Michael a pointed look. "He can wait outside." Michael didn't budge. He didn't need to. A quiet but firm voice came from the doorway. "She requested he be here," said the nurse, her badge reading S. Lopez, RN. "He's not just a visitor." Margaret bristled. He's not family. The nurse stepped inside, gently placing a hand on the priest's arm, pausing the ritual. He's legal. In her advance directive and medical chart, he's listed as her husband. Michael said nothing, just reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small, creased folder, its beige paper curling at the edges. He opened it with steady hands, tilting it to the light. Claire's signature, neat and unmistakable, sat above the printed words, "Next of kin, Michael Joseph Harris, spouse." The priest blinked, confused. The nurse nodded knowingly. Margaret froze, staring at the document, her lips parting but silent. Then her eyes slid to the wedding band, still shining on Claire's finger, the one she'd tried not to notice all morning. Michael didn't gloat, didn't say, "She chose me." He simply folded the directive and tucked it away, then turned to Claire, brushing a strand of hair from her forehead. The priest cleared his throat. "Would you like to join the blessing?" he asked, addressing Michael this time. Michael nodded once. "She believed in grace," he said quietly. "Let's give her that." As the priest began praying, Margaret stood rigid at the foot of the bed, arms crossed, her posture a mix of confusion and unease. But Michael was already back to what mattered, her hand in his. In that moment, surrounded by judgment and stifled grief, he wasn't invisible, wasn't hidden. He was exactly who Claire described in her letters, in love, in truth. Her husband, her family. The funeral unfolded under a cloudy noon sky, pressing silence into every corner. Claire's family stood in tight clusters beneath oak trees, their conversations shallow and clipped. Such lovely flowers. What a nice service. No one mentioned Michael. He stood alone, not by choice, as he had in life. Later that day, in the stillness of Claire's childhood home, her younger sister, Emily, wandered into the study. Dust clung to picture frames and forgotten books. She wasn't looking for anything specific, just trying to feel her sister again. Claire always loved that room, saying it was the only one in the house that felt like hers. Emily opened the bottom desk drawer and saw it immediately. A small cream-colored envelope atop a worn blue journal, inscribed in neat handwriting, "To my family. Please read after I'm gone." Her breath caught. She hesitated, then carried the letter to the living room where her parents still sat. Margaret, on the couch's edge, jaw tight, her father sipping half a cup of cold tea. "What's this?" Margaret asked. Emily sat slowly, her voice a whisper. "Claire left us a letter." No one spoke as Emily broke the seal, her hands trembling. She began reading aloud softly. "If you're holding this, I'm gone. I debated writing this, but there are things I couldn't say while alive. Now I have nothing to lose. You never knew Michael. Not really. But I did. I knew every part of him. How he held me when I was scared, how he listened without judgment, how he made me feel safe in a world that told us we were a mistake. You always thought I kept him away out of shame. That's not true. I kept him away to protect him from your judgment, your whispered slurs, your polite smiles that never reached your eyes. I didn't want the man I loved treated as less than he is." Emily's voice wavered. Across from her, her father stared down. Margaret's lips pressed into a line. Emily continued, "I was diagnosed a year ago. I didn't tell any of you because I knew what would follow. Cold comfort, control, drama. Instead, I made another choice.
Michael and I married again in a small chapel by the lake, just us. I wore a white dress, and he cried during our vows.
It was the happiest day of my life, even knowing it was one of my last. You may think he wasn't my family, but he was, my only true family in the end. So, if you still believe he was a mistake, that's okay. But know my final wish was to have him by my side when I left this world. And he gave me that, even knowing what he'd face when I was gone. Please let go of your pride. It's too late for me, but not for you. With love, Claire. Silence fell like a curtain. Margaret blinked, her mouth parting slightly, but no words came. Emily carefully folded the letter, setting it back on the table. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. Her father reached for his glasses, wiping them though they were already clean, tears glistening in his eyes for the first time in years. In the hallway, the old grandfather clock chimed, soft and distant, as if time were releasing something it had held too tightly. Upstairs, the blue journal waited beside an old photo album, and somewhere in the quiet distance, Michael sat in their small living room, surrounded by empty mugs and the lingering scent of her favorite lotion on a scarf she wore. He didn't know the letter had been read, but he didn't need to. He'd already lived it, every word, every day, every moment she was his. The sun reached its peak, bathing the small cemetery in gentle golden warmth. Trees swayed softly in the breeze, their branches whispering to each other like voices of the long-departed, still telling stories to the earth. Michael walked slowly along the gravel path, a bouquet of white peonies in hand. He didn't hurry. He never did when it came to her. Claire's headstone stood beneath an old elm, simple and elegant, just as she wanted. No ornate carvings, no poetic epitaphs, just her name, her years, and a line etched in small, soft letters. Deeply loved, always returned. Michael knelt beside it, his fingers brushing fallen leaves from the stone's base. He arranged the peonies carefully, then sat back on his heels, letting the silence settle around him. No one else came today, and he hadn't expected them to. That was okay. He exhaled slowly. "Hey," he said softly, his voice nearly swallowed by the wind. "I've finally worked up the nerve to visit the beach again." A faint smile crossed his lips, his eyes misting but dry. "The bench is still there, your name still carved in the corner. I sat on it for a while, remembering how you laughed when I said the water was too cold. But you dove in anyway." A pause. He lowered his head. "They didn't have to know me," he whispered. "You did. That was enough." The breeze picked up, ruffling his coat. He reached into his pocket, pulling out a small photo, one of the few they'd taken together, one she insisted on printing. Her in a straw hat, him squinting at the sun, both laughing mid-frame. He placed it by the flowers, weighted by a smooth stone. Behind him, a car door closed softly. Unseen by Michael, a young nurse from the hospital, Sarah Lopez, passed by. Visiting her grandparents' plot nearby, she paused, seeing him, a tall black man kneeling alone, not quite mourning, but something deeper, tender. She watched, hand on her chest, the stillness of his shoulders, his silence filled with presence, not absence. Something shifted. She reached for her phone and dialed. "Dad," she said quietly. "No, I'm okay. Just wanted to say I love you." Michael rose, dusting dirt from his knees, and looked to the sky. The sun had broken fully through the trees, bathing Claire's headstone in light, as if blessing it. He nodded slightly, as if to someone standing beside him, then turned and walked back down the gravel path, step slow, steady, echoing softly off the stones, carrying not just grief, but peace. Sometimes love doesn't need an audience. It doesn't dress for approval or wait for permission to bloom. It only needs truth. And when the world closes its eyes, love shows up anyway. Beneath a wide canopy of summer leaves, Claire's grave rests in quiet dignity. A breeze stirs gently, gliding past her headstone like a whispered memory. Beside it, in the grass, lies a single wedding photo, faded at the edges, but vivid at its heart. Claire and Michael, arms around each other, smiling wide, their laughter almost audible through the image. The sun hits it at just the right angle, its glow shimmering across, soft and golden, as if the universe itself tips its hat to what it witnessed but never hindered. In the background, the wind plays with the trees, rustling their leaves like a lullaby. No more secrets, no more shame, just love, gentle, patient, uncompromising, etched in stone and memory.